Hi, everybody. So this is Cheyenne from Ruby Easel Art Studio. And I'm teaching today how to paint a landscape. I am recording the session so everybody knows so that I can put it out for those who weren't able to attend. There was some scheduling problems with Facebook. I don't know why they have me registered as somehow in a totally different time zone. So I registered it for 7 p.m. and it said 5. So just in case anybody missed it, I'm going to record this and then put it up. So today I'm using a 9 by 12 canvas board, and that's simply because I can lay it flat on my desk and it's easy for you all to see. I put up the color list in the group and I will include it in the description of the video when I put it on YouTube as well. You don't need every color that I listed. I just put as many colors on the list as I could think of, and I put all of the colors on the list that I used in my trials for this painting. So I'm going to switch now to my other camera. And this is a test class. To be clear, this is a test class so that I can get used to how Zoom works and everything. And I'm not liking the webinar setup, but the meetings is actually pretty good. So I'm going to switch to my USB camera. So here you can see my blank canvas, and I'm using some blue and some white to start the sky. My mom pointed out earlier that I listed cerulean blue and I'm actually using cobalt blue, and it doesn't really matter. Cobalt and cerulean are so close to each other that it's almost impossible to really tell the difference. And if you hear me pause for a minute, I might be allowing more people into the room because there might be people in the waiting room, but I don't see anybody now. Okay, so I'm using, I've put blue and I've put white. Now, usually you'd put it on your palette. I have a habit of putting things directly onto my canvas. So I'm going to start spreading out the blue, and then I'm going to spread out the white. But I start at the blue first, dark at the top of the sky, closer to the helix of the atmosphere, which is also, you'll notice that when you're walking around outside, it's darker the further you look up. Same is true in the night sky. If you're ever painting a night sky, the night sky is always darkest right in the middle. I'm using these big wide strokes to spread it out, spread out the blue. Then I rinsed off some of mine because I put a little bit too much blue. You never have enough white with this. I'm just going to start spreading it out, spreading it up into the blue and pulling the blue down. And we're kind of using the photographic principle in this today, which is a third of this canvas is sky, a third of the canvas is background, or in this case, in this uh, class, it will be mountains. And then a third of it is foreground, or in this case, a field of flowers. And in this painting, it's all kind of viewed from a distance. And I did that because this is a beginner class. So I'm using these big wide strokes, going all the way across. You can see how darker at the top, lighter going down. And I'm just trying to blend it all in smooth. Can be hard to do. Then I'm cleaning off my wash brush. The wash brush I'm using is a 3/4 inch, but you don't need to use one that's big. I just find it to be easiest, and I'm used to doing big canvases. I've just washed it off and now I'm going over it again. And you see how I'm getting a better blending effect? with the clean brush. So if ever you're having trouble, it might be that paint is coming off of your brush and causing streaks. So if you're ever having trouble getting a smooth blend, wash off your brush and then go back at it, but while it's still wet. That's important. If you're trying to blend anything, it has to still be very wet. It can't even be tacky or you're going to get big streaks. So I've done that. And now this I'm going to let sit to dry for a minute. And while that's drying, I'm going to talk to you about the mountain. Mountains are one of my favorite things to paint and something that I'm still practicing on. And I think you never should stop practicing. Um, but for these mountains, we're going to use some phthalo blue. And I'm only putting a little bit out to begin with. But if you have a big pat, don't worry about it. I'm just using a little piece because I've got my bottle right here anyway. And the thing about Zoom is they're only giving me 40 minutes to do this whole class, which I had scheduled in 2 hours. So I'm kind of going to have to do this like Bob Ross and just go lickety split. So I'm using the same wash brush that I used for the sky for the mountains. And because it's wet, what I'm going to do first is dry it. I've cleaned it off. It's stained blue from how many skies I do because I do a lot of landscapes, but I do have all the paint off. Um, and I've dried it. It's still damp, but it's not dripping with water. So now I am just checking a notification. Okay, never mind. I thought somebody was trying to get in. Um, Now I'm using my flat wash brush, just the tip of it, and I'm dipping it into the phthalo, but I'm not putting the whole, see how that side has almost no paint on it? That side has a big dab. You don't want it on the other side because it makes streaks. So I have it and I'm going to decide where I want my mountain to be. And I kind of like having multiple mountains in one picture. So I'm going to choose where I want the edge of the top of the mountain to be, place my brush there, and pull down. And that's the beginning. That's where my mountain's going to be. So then I'm going to like that and like that. I think I'll do another little baby mountain right here. Supposedly it's never really a baby mountain, but whatever. And then another, maybe a little higher. Pull it down. And I really like the Rocky Mountains. So that kind of mountain I'm doing is like the Rocky Mountain, a pushed up mountain. I forget what the scientific name for that is right now. The kind of mountain that is generated when two continents collide and push up on each other. Very spiky. So that's why I'm doing them with such peaks. They're very jagged and raggedy and quite attractive to paint, I think. And then just the edge of one going off of the view right there. In. And then I'm just going to work on painting them in. thing about the horizon is you want it to be pretty level, but it doesn't have to be perfect because it's land, not water. So I'm just going to mark out where my field is going to be. I think I'll do it right about there. And that just marks out for me where the bottom of the mountain is. I'm going to paint over that. It's going to be like a back painting. Painting this in. More phthalo. I didn't put enough out. This is phthalo blue. I also have phthalo green in the color list, which is simply because I needed a deep dark green. You can also use something called hooker's green. Sometimes it's sold as forest green. Um, Emerald green is closer to sap green, which is the other green that I'm using. It's like the color of new spring leaves or a light green similar to that. And now that I'm painting in, I'm not worried about which side my paint is on. I'm just got it and I'm painting them in. I want them to be as dark as possible. And then we're going to paint in details. See here, I've messed up and I've got that. So I'm just going to go over it. And it just appears as part of the mountain now. This, what goes off the view here, has kind of become, I wonder how far I want it to go. It's kind of become the foreground mountain. I think I want it to go that far. That is in there. So I'm cleaning my brush now of the dark blue. Because I have the dark blue laid down. At this point, I still have just dark blue and light blue on my canvas. Right now, I'm going to put out some white for myself. I'm going to need that eventually. So now we have the dark blue background in, and I'm going to decide where, sorry, blending in a daub. I'm going to decide where and how the light is coming to hit my mountains, because that's going to determine how I'm laying out the light blue details I'm about to put in, and it will determine where I put the white to show the snow on the mountains. Now, these are mountains, they have snow on them, but it's also summer, obviously, with a field of flowers. So they're not covered. It's not like a winter, it's like the mountains you see around Mackenzie in June. You know, there's snow on them. There's a snowpack that's still melting, but it's not all gone yet. So I think I'm gonna have my light coming from this way, from the left across. So my video is upside down. Yeah, my video is upside down. Wonderful. Okay. So I've got my cobalt, in my case, cobalt blue, and I'm going to make details. I'm using cobalt on the tip of my brush, and I'm standing it up and dabbing. And that gives me a lot more control. And everywhere that I'm dabbing is going to be lighter. It's showing where the light is hitting. Top, coming down. If you've ever seen the Rocky Mountains, they really craggy. They've got a lot of rivers and divots, and it looks like rivers have come running down the side of the mountain, but there's nothing there. It's just how they're formed. They're very craggy. This one I'm not putting barely any highlights because it's small and it's kind of behind the other one. If I put any snow on that at all, it'll basically be to delineate that that is in fact a separate mountain. Wouldn't be because you'd really see it very well. Coming down here. This is the closest one, so it gets the most detail. Dabbing and lifting, and even just making marks in the previously smooth paint will help you decide where to put your snow after. Even if you're not doing any great shakes and leaving marks. And at this point, where I am anyway, I feel like I've got enough details on the mountain for now. And I'm going to let that sit and dry. I'm going to let it dry before I do the snow part. Or at least I'm going to let it get as dry as I can let it get before I have to end the Zoom call. So obviously I've done the sky. I've laid in my mountains. They're not perfect, but they're laid in. Now I'm going to think about putting the field here. I'm not putting flowers yet. I'm just putting field. So to do that, I'm using a dark green and a light green. Now this is phthalo green, which is very, very dark green that's got a tiny little bit of blue in it, and it's a very strong green. If you tried to mix a little bit of this with white, you'd have pale green until doomsday. I made that mistake. I put phthalo blue in with some white a while back because I was making a snow landscape that had multiple um vibrancies and colors, like temperatures of white that I needed to do it properly. And like I needed warm white, I needed cool white, I needed titanium white, I needed ash white, which was a little bit of gray mixed in. And I tried to do the cool white by using a tiny little bit of phthalo blue, and it just made so much. I'm still working with the white. Whenever I need white now, I'm just, as long as it's not a titanium white, I'm using the cool stuff. Bright green. So I've got a dark green and I've got a bright green. I used phthalo green for the dark green, and I'm using fluorescent sap green for the light green. And yeah. So what I'm going to do first is with the dark green, because the further away from you, the darker it is. So at the top, I'm going to use dark green and my brush flat. In the same way that I made the line when I made the horizon marker line, I'm laying out the top of the field. It doesn't have to be perfectly straight, like I say, because it's land, not water. Sometimes land has hills. Does not matter. And I'm using it sideways like this and moving back and forth, and it's leaving marks like you see in a field, right? Grass does not grow perfectly. Grass does not grow straight. Grass does not grow any way you think it's going to grow. It will grow in the opposite way, which is why it's so freaking hard to keep a lawn going. But I'm bringing it all the way down. So I've got lots of that marked out. Now we're getting closer to me, so I'm going to switch to the brighter green and keep doing the same thing. And at this point, I'm mixing the two colors. And we're getting closer to a grass green. And that's the important thing, is we're trying to make it look like grass. Now, we do not have to paint grass. We do not have to paint a whole bunch of individual grass blades, because it's not a field of grass that we're painting. We're painting a field of flowers. Now, if you're looking for acrylics out there and you're looking for acrylics to work with, I highly recommend, especially if you're going to do landscapes, getting yourself soft body acrylics. Heavy body acrylics are less expensive, so a lot of people are tempted to get them, but they're more suited to palette knife painting, not this sort of fine painting. So get yourself some soft body acrylics. And this isn't even fine painting. This is just something cute I wanted to show everybody for the free class. But it does make my life 1,000 times easier to have the soft body paints. And that's because they spread. They spread. You don't need as much of them to cover a canvas. Heavy body paints, you will use half a tub trying to cover a couple feet of canvas. So I've laid out my field. So now I have my field laid out. I have my mountains laid out. I have my sky. I'm cleaning off my wash brush. And at this point, I think I'm pretty much done with it. Now, as far as brushes, I had listed the round brush, which I have mine right here, and the wash brush in the supplies list. You can also use, which I've been using, a small fan brush, but it would have to be small. If you do not have a small fan brush, I recommend using your flat brush. Again, your wash brush. This is the one that I've been using to do the flowers, and it's a very, very small fan brush. It's size 3, dinky little thing, and they're hard to find. So if you don't have that, go with a small flat brush. It's a lot easier and you don't have to search and search. I usually have more time to let this dry, but I'm going to forge ahead. And you don't have to follow with me. You can, take your time and pause the video or come back later. Or if you're following along in the Zoom class right now, then it will be coming up. Let me remind you, it will be coming up for you to use in the future. And I'm kind of looking through my brushes, what I've got on my desk here for one that's a little bit stiff. This is a small flat and it's stiff. This is a horsehair brush that I have and it's very stiff. You can get synthetic brushes if you're vegan or if you can't afford a hairbrush that are similar textures. But a horsehair brush is just very stiff and it stands up and it holds its own when you're using heavy body acrylics. And that's why I have it because I usually use heavy body. Well, I was using heavy body from this big bunch of paint that I had. But it's also great when you're using soft body and you're trying to do snow because the brush stands up and you can dab with it. So I've got my pat of white here and I'm putting just the tip of it in. I'm not like loading up my brush, it's just the tip. And then beside my pile of white, I'm going to dab it just a little bit like that so that I'm not leaving a big pat of paint on my canvas. So now I'm going to start doing this. And in the same way that I was marking out where the ridges of the mountains were going to be, I'm marking out the snow. And if you're having to do it when it's still wet like I am, your brush is going to pick up a little blue, and don't feel bad about that. It's just the nature of having to work wet on wet. And you know what? Snow looks blue from a distance as well as the mountain itself. Everywhere there was a ridge of a mountain, I'm adding snow. And you can assume, looking at it, that there is snow in other parts of it as well, just that you wouldn't see it. It doesn't stand out because of the shadows, because the light's hitting this side of the mountain, not illuminating that side of the mountain, so you don't see it as well. You can add streaks that show snow there, but I'm doing that after I've picked up blue. We have 10 minutes left, I believe. Yep. Getting my snow up in my mountains. This time limit I do not like, so I will definitely be looking into another platform or into upgrading. This test class is very useful, by the way. Thank you everybody for attending. So, there was a ridge. Oh, Closer Mountain has more details. Simply because it's closer and that's how our eyes work. And I'm kind of using my brush and long strokes to get rid of the dabbed effect on the Closer Mountain, because it wouldn't look so dabbed to you when it was closer. Long strokes up and down, sideways, backwards, forwards, whichever way you're doing it. Okay, that's as much as I'm going to work on the mountains for right now because I'm running out of time. Thank you so much, Zoom. Now I have this yellow and I have magenta. Now magenta is this really, really strong color. It doesn't seem to matter what brand you have, what kind of magenta you have, what ratio of magenta you have. It's just a very strong color. So I put a little bit of magenta. I put it near to my white, and then I scoop up a whole bunch of white, more white than you think you need, and drop it into your magenta. And what I'm doing here is I'm making the pink that we're going to use for flowers. And if you don't have magenta, that's fine. You can use red. If you have a pink that's already mixed, you can just use pink. Or you can use a different color. If you want purple ones, you can have a purple setup. So that's that. And then my yellow is up there. Now the ones I've been using to do the flowers is this teeny tiny little one, but again, you can use your flat one. If you're going to use your flat one, what you're going to want to do is take it, and just like before we did the mountains, before we switched to the adding the lighter color of the mountains, we washed it off and then dried it. You're going to want to do that before you try to do your flowers. And now it's the same motion that I'm going to make with this brush is what you're going to do with a flat brush. And the first thing I'm going to do is dip the tips of the brush into, I'm using pink. And then right back at the horizon, I'm going to start tapping. And you're tapping. And you're following the horizon line. You're not putting it on the mountains, because if there were flowers up there, you wouldn't see them from that distance. You're doing it on the field. And then switching to yellow. And I'm going to switch back and forth between yellow and pink a lot, because that's how a field of flowers would look. There isn't just one color out there, right? Back to pink. And further away from you, they'll be dimmer, like duller in color. They will blend more in with the green of the field. They will blend more in with the blue of the mountains. So if you're working on a wet field and at the back you're getting some color mix in, don't worry about it. If you're moving forward and it starts to mix in, that's when you should worry about it. But you can also just let your painting dry and go back with your brush and go over the front flowers later. And I'm just laying out flowers. I'm doing it all the way to the front in the same sort of thing, but the clumps of flowers are getting bigger the closer that they get to me. Small flower patches in the back, big flower patches in the front, simply because they're getting closer to you. And it's pretty much a carpet of flowers. And I chose this landscape to do because it's very similar to a scene that I saw on our way to Grand Prairie last June up in the Pine Pass. So you may recognize these mountains if you're from around Mackenzie or Chetwynd. Big, beautiful field of flowers, almost like a super bloom from back home. And it might seem superfluous to put a green field and then put the flowers over it, but it would not look right if you didn't have the green field. It doesn't have to be perfect. You can go over some of the pink with the yellow or the yellow with the pink because they wouldn't be perfectly separated, especially at the edges of the patches anyways. Let some patches be brighter, let some patches be darker. That will allude to pits and valleys and shadows in the field. And that is it. That is how I've done it. And I am actually out of time. I will post this on Facebook for everybody, and I will post the finished, example pictures and everything. Um, thank you for attending my test class. And please, if you're watching the video afterwards, give me ideas for what platform to use. If you use a different platform than Zoom, um, I'm not sure if I'm happy with it, especially with the time limit. Um, yeah, thank you everybody for attending, and thank you for helping me test out the class. And I hope you enjoy doing the painting. Yours will be a lot more polished than mine. I'm not a very good Bob Ross. I can't do stuff in 30 minutes. Um, but yeah, thank you very much and have a great day.